So good afternoon, everybody. And I would like to extend a very warm welcome to everyone joining this AmChams in Europe event focused on the current Ukraine-Russian war. So hoping everyone's tuned in and everyone can see everyone correctly. It's my absolute honor to be part of this network that is really standing together in troubling times. And I'm delighted to be able to introduce some of my esteemed colleagues from around Europe. But you can hopefully see some of them on the screen here. Andy, Liga, Tadas, Daria, Peter, and Tomi. Thank you so much for joining us today and agreeing to speak, sadly, I have to say, on this topic. Now, the objective of the call today is to really inform each other and our members. So we have our other fellow AmChams on the line and members about what is happening and some of the actions that are already being taken, whether by individual governments, whether they're by AmChams or whether they're by businesses across Europe and wider Europe. But for the benefit of those of you on the call who may not be so familiar with our network, let me just briefly introduce it. AmChams in Europe stands for, well, it's ACE, is established in 1963. It serves as the umbrella organization for 46 independent American chambers of commerce in 44 countries across Europe and Eurasia. And I should add that we are all independent and apolitical associations. In Europe, we represent more than 17,000 American and European companies employing more than 20 million workers, which accounts for $1.1 trillion of investment on both sides of the Atlantic. Of American and European companies. And AmChams in Europe works to communicate the importance of the transatlantic economy also in both Europe and the United States. 3 weeks ago, as ACE, this network, we made our first statement condemning the war in Ukraine and calling for peace. And I would like to stress here that AmChams in Europe supports all the ongoing efforts to avoid further escalation, to protect civilians and safeguard security and prosperity across the region. And this statement was signed by all of our AmChams, excluding AmCham Russia. Last week, we were proud that we hosted our first ACE event really on these same objectives to inform. It was open to all our members, including Andy from AmCham Ukraine, as well as the AmChams. In that case, we did it from neighboring countries, such as Romania, Poland, Moldova, Hungary, and Slovakia. If you missed it, there's a recording of that event available. But today we wanted to host this event to have a more open discussion again about the current situation in Ukraine. So we're going to hear from Andy Hunder, who is president of AmCham Ukraine, first of all. But we also thought it would be interesting and very important to hear the view from the Baltics and the Nordic countries. You know, how are governments reacting up there? Some of them are non-NATO countries. And let's get this perspective. There are countries also bordering Russia with very long borders and great dependence on Russia as well. So that's what we plan to do today. And so with that, we do have Andy Hunder, President AmCham Ukraine, Liga Smiltina Bertelsone, Executive Director, Liga, from AmCham Latvia. We have Tadas Veskida, Chairman for AmCham Lithuania. We have Daria Sivavol, CEO AmCham Estonia. And we have Peter Dahlen, Managing Director AmCham Sweden, and Tomi Ere, who is the chairman of AmCham Finland. So what we're going to do, so everyone understands the format, I'm going to hand the word first of all over to Andy, who's just told me he's now, you can tell us where you are, Andy, he's made it to London, for about 10 minutes to give us a bit of an overview, Andy, again, of well, what's happening, where you are, and how as business leaders we can help. And if there's any update, we know that 3 prime ministers traveled to the Ukraine last week, the Polish, the Czech, and the Slovenian, and met with President Zelensky. And any update from that, any outcome, what are the prospects from the peace negotiations that are going on? And just an update from you. And then we'll go straight on to the other colleagues for about, no more than 4 minutes each. And then we have time at the end for questions. So for the audience, if you'd like to put questions into the chat, please do a bit later on the line. But first of all, Andy, again, we wish you and your team all the best. We stand with you and the people of Ukraine. Can you give us a bit of an update of how things stand at the moment? Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you, Susan. And on behalf of AmCham Ukraine, I want to say a massive thank you to all the ACE, the AmChams in Europe. And I think the support that we've been receiving, the the tangible assistance and help we're extremely grateful and eternally indebted. 26 days now, and our number one priority every morning as we wake up is to check that the whole team are alive. The shelling continues of Kiev, of many other cities. You've probably seen some of the images coming out of Mariupol. We are the biggest AmCham in Europe, so we have a full-time staff of 45 people. 15 of those are at the moment outside of Ukraine, mainly in EU countries. 20 are internally displaced, having moved mainly to Western Ukraine. And so we still have 10 people in Kiev. We have we have 36 female staff and 9 male. The males, Ukrainian nationals, aren't allowed to leave, so they are all in the country. And every morning we have a call. I think, psychologically it's very important to see faces, to be able to share stories. And I think the team, it's something that we do every day. So our number one priority is to make sure everyone's alive, everyone's healthy, that people have the financial resources. So in terms of paying salaries in advance, we are also looking now at additional funding for our staff, because the cost of living in Ukraine compared to cost of living in some other European countries, there's a pretty significant difference. So I think that's what we're looking at. And having the communication, so the team all being able to communicate, so we know where everyone is and everyone is safe and alive. So for 26 days now, the war has been ongoing. What we are focusing on now is pretty much listening to our members and seeing what they can do. We just put a survey out today in terms of who's doing what. So we have the latest numbers that just came out today. 88% of the companies that actually continue to operate, albeit half of these are working sort of in a slimmed down mode, so partially working. 18% have relocated, but some still have shut down operations. 95% of all member companies, they are continuing to pay salaries, which is extremely important. 92% are providing support to the humanitarian drive, mainly with financial support or in-kind goods. 65% are supporting the territorial defense units, with 40% of members saying their employees have joined the territorial defense units, defending their community, their town, and the country. The biggest challenges what members face now, 79% is the safety and security of employees. So that still remains the number one issue. And then we have things like logistics and transport and continued operations. 86% of members do support a global boycott of all international companies that have kept their operations open in Russia. So in terms of continuing the business, the big sectors we've had in the past have been agriculture. That obviously has become a massive challenge at the moment because of the ports. We have seen that vessels have been bombed in terms of sort of merchant vessels. So the access to Odessa is closed off. We still have 2 ports that are functioning, but the situation in the sea is very dangerous as ships have been targeted. And so we've had a sunken ship vessel over the last few days. Many do try to continue, especially the IT sector, but it is finding a location where the members and their employees can continue to operate in a safe environment, because we still have regular air raid sirens blaring, and it's making sure that everyone is safe. Again, we are very grateful to the AmChams across Europe that have reached out and are helping. The requests we get from governments are very different. We had one yesterday, which I shared with the AmChams. It's, the governments are looking to procure 10 million packs of pasta, cans of meat, baked beans, and it's really, they're ready to pay upfront to get these goods in, because the logistics issue has become, something very, very important. Most of the companies are focusing on a humanitarian drive. We've seen many donations coming in, but at the end of the day, it's really making sure that the funds that they reach the people most in need. And with shooting ongoing, that is a big challenge. In the short term, in terms of the economy, the number one probably issue at the moment would still be getting sowing of the crops, planting of the seeds, because we are in end of Q3, and the crops, Ukraine number one in the world for sunflower seeds, sunflower oil, big in corn, and it's not missing that window, which is extremely important to have the sowing of the crops, because I think, global food prices and global delivery of soft commodities is very much dependent on this. We are regularly in touch with the members. The members are continuing doing everything possible. The banking sector has done a phenomenal job in terms of keeping operations, so people do have access to funds, to both online and to cash, which is very important. But there's a real sense of unity. I've been in Ukraine since '96, 25 years. I've never recall seeing such a sense of unity and seeing so much humanity when people all come together, and total strangers, and the acts of kindness is amazing. I think we are preparing for this in the long run. I think, our team, we have told them this is going to be a marathon. We have to be ready for a long war, potentially, hopefully not. So in terms of budgeting, we will be paying salaries. We've done all our finances, and until 31st of December, I think we can definitely do that. And then we are looking at other reserves and other forms, because again, we don't know in Q4 whether we'll have members paying membership dues. So I think we are looking already a good 9 months ahead to see, how we plan and taking care of our employees. And it's, keeping in touch, and it's making sure that everyone is safe and don't find themselves vulnerable wherever they are, either in Europe or back in Ukraine. So I think, again, I'm extremely grateful to the AmChams in Europe for all the support. We're very lucky to have this family. And, on behalf of all AmCham Ukraine, God bless you, and thank you for all your support. We're extremely grateful. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks very much. It's sort of encouraging in a way to get the update, and just to hear, like you said, about the word of unity, and very interesting results from the survey, I have to add as well. So it seems like a great exercise and be a good one to monitor. Look forward to coming back to you in the Q&A, Andy, to hear a little bit more about how those on the line can continue to help and support. But let's turn our attention to the Baltics. As mentioned at the beginning, we'd like to see, what is the impact up there? I'm going to kick off with the Baltics and then move to the Nordics. For most of the citizens of the Baltic states, the war in Ukraine is probably a very strong reminder of why they did fight to join NATO and the European Union. But it will be interesting to hear your views on that. And I think, I am no expert of the Baltics, but I'm aware, and have become even more aware, as many of us have, of the very large Russian speaker population as well in many of those countries up there, as well as we're becoming more and more aware of the map and the length of the border. And then we have issues of the dependency on Russia for energy, amongst many other aspects. So we're going to turn to you just for a small update. I'm going to go first to Daria, my colleague Daria Sivovol, who is, I think, going to give us a unique perspective on this. Daria, it's always a pleasure to see you. CEO of AmCham Estonia. Daria herself, but she can explain that far better than I, is actually from Ukraine. Have been thinking of you. I know you were born in Kharkiv. That's your home city. Can you give us some reflections, please, Daria, on how things are going in Estonia and how the government's reacting, how businesses reacting, and the people? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Susan. And I would like to start by thanking Susan, Aisha, and the entire ACE team for bringing us together and driving these discussions during this difficult and critical times. I think it's important for us to all exchange all this information and stick together, as you pointed out before. Also, I would like Andy to use this opportunity as a fellow Ukrainian, but also representing AmCham Estonia and all our members here. I wanted to tell you that our thoughts and prayers are with you and your team and the people of Ukraine. And I'm really, really proud that here in Estonia, the support for Ukraine and the people of Ukraine has been absolutely phenomenal and unprecedented. We've had one of the biggest demonstrations in the history of the country right after the war has started, right here in the center of Tallinn. And up to this moment, the whole country is colored in blue and yellow. So our minds and souls are definitely with you guys. Just a very short update from our side. I know that we wanted to stick to 4 minutes, so I'll try to have a mix of different updates very quickly. Of course, there's a lot of underlying security concerns as Estonia, as Estonia is part of NATO, as Susan already pointed out, this is currently the main message for the public. So Estonian officials are focused on reassuring the Estonian public that they're safe. Secretary Blinken was here in Estonia just over a week ago, and to reassure Estonia also of NATO's ironclad commitment under Article 5 to protect every inch of the territory. There's a lot of focus on information access and making sure that people do not receive misleading information. Quite a few Russian TV channels have been blocked by the main service providers. And now it's been announced that 21 Russian internet sites are being blocked right now for distributing false information and propaganda in support of aggression. Just a few words about the refugee situation in Estonia. As you know, Estonia is tiny. We're 1.3 million people, but we've been receiving quite a lot of refugees from Ukraine. And at this point, as of today, we have over 30,000 refugees, and of course, we'll see more. Just to kind of give you a perspective, because we're so little, for our market is like if we compare it to the United States, it would be like US would be receiving 5 million at this point. So it's actually quite a large number. And Estonia has made it very easy for the arriving refugees to receive a temporary permit. So this can be done in one day. They work, the center that gives out the permits is working in the evenings and over the weekends. It's valid for 1 year, and it can be extended if necessary. Housing, food, medical insurance, and free public transportation are provided as well. When we talk about business perceptions and outlook, of course, sanctions are going to impact everyone. And the main focus here, of course, in Estonia right now, the main discussions are on energy. Estonia is relatively protected because of oil shale, but still the dependency on Russian gas is quite big. And the discussions, of course, are focusing on the need to decrease this dependency on the Russian energy. Our Prime Minister Kallas, who's been very outspoken and speaks at a lot of conferences right now, stated recently in her interviews that Europe should develop green energy and import more liquefied natural gas, LNG, to reduce its dependence on Russia. So Estonian government is currently looking at LNG terminals and other resources to reduce our reliance on Russian energy. We did have a really long and cold winter with unprecedented energy prices, and our gas prices are at record high. Economy, inflation is now expected to continue rather than be a shorter blip like it was initially forecast by the Bank of Estonia. We could see some job losses in areas that will be tough to replace. As you know, Estonia was big on transit, ports, and things like that. Local businesses, however, are joining large multinationals in blocking Russian trade and business activities. We have a lot of store chains like Rimi, Maxima, Selver removing Russian goods from the shelves. Many local companies have launched special fundraising activities and programs selling certain Ukrainian themed products. Almost everywhere you go, you would see something with a Ukrainian flag or colors. And this is the way to raise money, donate to various organizations in Ukraine. Of course, everything will see impacts of trade flows and disruption in supply chains, but still the main focus and the main topic here is security. And Prime Minister Kallas said that we have to quickly adapt to the fast changing security situation in the region, and Estonia has significantly increased its military expenses. So by 2023, Estonian government is planning to increase military expenses to 2.44% of the GDP. Just to sum it up, the main, I would say, questions that we wake up with and go to bed with is security, cybersecurity, information, access, energy dependence, and alternative resources, supply chain and trade flows, and the future of the Baltic security and revising the current security strategies. So I hope
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Daria. Actually, we could do with 1 hour for each of you here because I'm already thinking of some questions. I might come back to you. I'm going to go through the flow on, security and delve into a bit more, what's fearful, well, security and cybersecurity, and pick up on that cybersecurity point, which we're hearing a lot about at the moment. But before we do that, Liga, can I go over to you in Latvia? Is it similar? Would you say it's sort of similar sort of mix of issues and concerns that Daria's outlined? And maybe a little bit, what's the mood in the country? Considering, I believe, but tell me if I'm wrong here, that Latvia is the country that has the most Russian speakers. And I heard that Ukrainians are actually the 4th largest ethnic group in Latvia. So maybe you can give us a little bit of a feel for that, especially of those of us living as I do here in Brussels. Thank you, Liga.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, AmChams Network, once again for hosting these really important conversations to get various perspectives on the current situation. And Andy, we stand strongly with you, your team, and all the people of Ukraine affected by this brutal act of aggression by Russia. And just starting off, I must say that I almost relate to everything what Daria just said about the situation in her country. I think it's very, very similar. But I also speak to 3 main directions how Latvia is responding to the current crisis. So first of all, on humanitarian aid. Our people and businesses have shown outpouring support and solidarity for Ukraine. So Latvians are really opening their homes, donating both funds and goods, including fuel and vehicles. Recently, a job board has been set up with over 4,000 vacancies already at more than 500 companies that are open to Ukrainian workforce. Many companies are relocating their teams to Latvia. Both our state and municipal agencies are working hand in hand to facilitate the reception and integration of Ukrainians through a coordinated approach. Our main message is very short and very simple. We see, we share, and we relate to the pain inflicted on you, and you're warmly welcome to Latvia. Secondly, on defense and security, Latvia is currently strengthening its eastern border with Russia and Belarus. NATO is reinforcing its eastern flank by deployment of additional troops, as it was also just explained by Daria. Latvia as well has decided to increase its spending for defense from more than 2%, which is currently to up to 2.5% of GDP in the next 3 years. My country is also strengthening its state, border guard, police, and civil defense. In the recent weeks, the National Guard, our National Guard, has also received close to 2,000 new applications from volunteers. And the political response has been swift and unanimous in condemning Russia's invasion and supporting Ukraine in all possible ways, be it militarily, practically, or morally. And given our multi-ethnic society, as you mentioned, Susan, and a fairly large Russian-speaking population, this is a very strong message from our political leadership. And in fact, we haven't seen such scope of unity for decades, and I think since regaining our independence more than 30 years ago. And thirdly, on business implications. So the war is obviously at the top of everyone's mind these days, and business is no exception there. Concerns expressed so far from our members include the overall impact on the economy, as Daria mentioned, energy security, energy independence, alternative energy supply, This is very, very important for our members and for the companies in Latvia. Sanctions and the impact of sanctions against Russia and Belarus, disruptions in supply chains, and of course, transformation of business operations. But I must say that while Russia has been quite a significant trading partner of Latvia, our trade relations have been decreasing over the last 8 years. And since the annexation of Crimea, Russia and Belarus have been regarded de facto as high-risk jurisdictions. And also, I must mention that in the recent years, considerable reforms in the financial sector had taken place in Latvia, resulting in less exposure of Russian money in our banking system. So the business and financial impact at this moment is much smaller than it used to be, and than it could have been just a few years ago. So to sum up, geopolitically, I think we are in a safer and more secure place we have ever been, being part of all these important alliances and partnerships, the EU, the European single market, the Eurozone, and of course, NATO. So I think our mission as AmChams is really very important at this moment to really help ensure stability and maintaining economic security in our countries. So I will stop here and will be ready to answer any questions and look forward to hearing perspectives from my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Liga. Reassuring, actually, some reassuring messages there that you say, and I think I quote you that the impact on trade is smaller than it has been, and in fact, you're feeling more safe and secure than perhaps you might have been a number of years ago now. So at least I'm trying to pick out the good news stories from today. So it'd be good for us to take away some of those. Moving on to Tadas, if I can, in Lithuania. Now, Tadas Vizgieda is not only, he's the chairman of AmCham Lithuania. That means he's a member, so he's also one of the member companies as well. So perhaps you can also give us your perspective from there, not only as an AmCham, but potentially also as a business leader yourself. So over to you. Thank you, Tadas.
Sure. Thank you, Susan. Andy, we've been thinking about you guys a lot, and please pass on our well wishes to the entire team as often as possible. It's unthinkable. Everything here is unthinkable. When we woke up on February 24th and saw this brutal attack on Ukraine and democracy, a lot of panic, a lot of unrest, a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress. There's many words we can sum up our feelings on the 24th. Things seemed to calm down, and then suddenly March 4th, an attack on the nuclear power plant brought back that stress and anxiety that we thought we learned to deal with. And this is something that's going to continue for quite a while. But we all know that panic is a result of lack of information or misinformation. As a result, the government here and the TV stations, actually the TV stations themselves, have banned Russian TV channels, which is very, very important in this whole crisis, especially with the older generations here that seem to just watch the Russian channels versus the local channels. But yeah, business out here, business has been, let's say, on edge a bit, but still moving forward. It seems as though the focus is looking at how to help Ukraine further, how to make everything possible for Ukraine to win this war. So everybody seems to be focused on the humanitarian side. Our shareholders in the U.S., they're not really caring about productivity right now. They're thinking, how can we contribute? And that's very important to get that message of unity out, to keep it going. So I've spoken to a number of businesses out here. The first week was very difficult. I was receiving calls from AmCham members in the US asking about the situation. Should we be sending charter jets to Lithuania to relocate our staff? And I said, calm down. And I hope you're not speaking that way to your employees, because if you're speaking that way to your employees in Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, anywhere, that panic is going to spread. So it's very, very important to actually go and to speak to senior leadership in the US or in any other part of Europe and have them calm down first, because it's viral, the panic. One thing that happened out here as far as business goes, tourism, I think today I met with Lithuanian airports representatives and they said, yeah, the numbers are up for travel. I said, well, are they one way or are they round trip? And they said, well, yeah, one way has gone up quite a bit. But one thing that we're looking at is the travel industry. Lithuania declared a state of emergency that was meant for budgeting purposes in order to be able to better secure the borders, to be able to control the flow of immigrants. Unfortunately, this triggered automatically a do not travel message from the State Department, from Germany and from other countries, where people actually think it's dangerous to travel to the Baltics. It is not dangerous. We all know it's not dangerous. Today, there is no imminent threat. It's something in the future that we may see. We're very much concerned as businesses of the system becoming overwhelmed by immigrants. We have 25,000 plus immigrants so far that have arrived from Ukraine. So we're really headed towards a potential humanitarian crisis if we don't continue helping as much as we can. This is also coupled by Belarusian immigrants who are also trying to escape the Lukashenko regime, and who knows what's going to happen there next. As well as Russian businesses relocating to Lithuania, Russian and Belarusian. So you hear a lot of people say, wow, yeah, the labor pool is going to be healthy again as far as the IT sector goes. Well, that's not the case. It's really going to lead to a humanitarian issue more than anything. So, my message here to all the businesses is to calm your employees down. Make sure there's no panic. Be open with them, communicate, reinsure business. We had the US ambassador, the embassy's defense attaché. We have the regional security officer for the State Department. That was our first webinar where we tried to reach out to people to try to reassure them. That went by very well. Last Friday, we had the Assistant Secretary of NATO address our membership. And that seemed to go by just as well. There's something about hearing the same thing that you already know coming from somebody else's mouth, somebody who knows more than you may know. So I do urge all AmChams to go ahead and use those two channels. We're also working closely with the Ukrainian ambassador to Lithuania. He paid me a visit at the beginning of the war, and we're helping fundraise through them and having the AmCham membership actually have access to his messaging in order to be able to donate where that money needs to go. We all think it's just humanitarian or just weapons. It's a real mix out there. And it's not just about weapons, it's about bulletproof vests, about helmets. So lots of communication. We will continue to communicate. But the most important message that I give everybody is support Ukraine today, and let's start getting ready to rebuild Ukraine tomorrow.
Tadas, thanks for that. I mean, again, each and every one of you have given us a sort of unique angle, which is really fruitful for everyone on the call. Certainly that panic one is not one we've heard yet, but I think is probably something that maybe others can relate to. Not everyone might agree, but a good message to give. So we'll come back to that. I'm sure you get some questions about that one, Tadas. Can I move on now to Tomi? We're going to move now from the Baltics to the Nordics, not that far, but you know in your region better than I. Tomi, similar to Tadas, you're chairman of AmCham Finland. Could you share with us again just looking for Tomi there to make sure I can see, yeah, there, hi Tomi. Could you share with us your business leader perspective, also particularly maybe a different angle here? Finland's not part of NATO, so what's the feeling in the country at the moment? You know, we've seen the news that Finland now might want to join NATO after all. You're also one of the few countries in the EU that still has conscription. Is that influencing the actions of the government in any way as well? But you know, again, a bit of a mix if you want to focus some business implications as well. Fantastic, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Susan. And thank you for all AmChams arranging this event. So first of all, so Andy, our thoughts in Finland are with you and your team and all Ukrainians defending your country. We have been there back in the day, and the thing that made a difference then was the strong will to defend Finland. And we are so proud seeing Ukrainians being so decisive and so willing defend your country. So that's really important. When it comes to business reaction in Finland, so it's very sure that the businesses in Finland stand with Ukraine. So I just looked at the numbers. So I looked at top 20 Finnish companies based on revenues from their operations in Russia. 17 have already taken actions by either closing all operations, effectively withdrawing from Russia, or stopping any deliveries, new investments or projects. So businesses in Finland stand with Ukraine. The implications of this war to businesses and economy in Finland, I would separate the kind of immediate things and a bit longer term. Those companies who have operations in Ukraine or Russia, so of course the first priority is to take care of the employees and their safety, planning those actions about closing operations or stop doing business with Russia. But also the companies are considering all the possibilities to provide humanitarian aid. So there is a bunch of immediate actions taking place. But in longer term, and I mean the operational horizon for this year and the strategic horizon for the coming years, there is a lot to do by the companies. How to ensure the supply chain reliability, finding new suppliers, rerouting logistics, that's a big effort for many companies. Improving cybersecurity has further increased dramatically its importance. Accelerating investments to use renewable energy is on top of many companies' agenda, and revising strategy to adjust and improve agility, planning for different scenarios, that what are the alternative outcomes of this crisis. The stock market in Helsinki took a hit about 10%, but more than half of that is recovered as of today. The economic growth in Finland also, there was an impact. So leading financial group reduced their estimate for this year's growth from 2.7% to 2%. So the war is slowing down Finland's growth, but Finnish economy is resilient. It was already shown during the COVID crisis, so we survived relatively well compared to many other countries, and also in this situation, the belief is that we are rather resilient. When it comes to the security situation, so obviously the geopolitical situation has changed, and there is no denying that we have this 1,300 kilometers of joint border with Russia. But the good news is that Finland is well prepared. So we have maintained strong defense all these years. We have paid a lot of attention on security of supply also during crisis situations. And we have strengthened many bilateral cooperations with the US and Sweden, for example, and several other countries. We are practicing frequently with NATO. We just purchased 64 F-35 fighter jets from US, so it shows that we do have strong partnerships. And as our president says, as of now, the security situation in Finland is good. There is no immediate threat, and we are prepared for alternative future scenarios. And like I said in the very beginning, it should be noted that Finland is among the highest in Europe when it comes to these surveys that are you willing to defend your country in crisis situation. And we have a strong military if that comes to need. Regarding this NATO, so we are not the NATO country. I looked at the statistics. So before Crimea, so back in 2012, 17% of Finns supported joining NATO, so 17. In 2019, that number was up to 28%. And in the latest survey, was it last week, but after the war started, 62% of Finns support joining NATO. So dramatic change in public opinion. And in some groups, like the reserve officers, which actually large share of Finnish business leaders belong to this group, it's more than 80% that support joining NATO. The official statement is that Finland maintains its right to decide what is best for us and when the time is right. And whether the time is right now, that's the big discussion, ongoing discussion within the government and the public of Finland. But as you can see from those percentages that I mentioned, the opinion is going to a certain definite direction. In summary, I would say that Finland as an investment location, we have our strengths and many of those are still intact. So businesses, I'm a management consultant by my daily profession. The projects are ongoing, new ones are getting launched. So companies are moving forward and I think we are a rather resilient economy. And actually, I think that as there is increasing uncertainty in external environment, so Finland's preparedness might be even more important than usual. And on a positive news, for example, last week, so after the war started, there was a massive investment by Microsoft and Fortum to a data center and district heating network in Finland announced last week. So we still see the investments coming in.
Yeah.
So
Thank
I
you,
can
Tommy.
stop with that.
Yeah, thank you so much. And on your last point, I think it's absolutely essential at the moment. We're hearing as well some really good news stories about whether US investment or other investments in bordering countries, in whether it's in the Baltics, Nordics, or whether it's down below towards Ukraine. We need to get out with those stories more to show there is still confidence, business confidence indeed. Fascinating statistics about the popularity now of joining NATO or not. And Peter, we'll come back, Tommy. Peter, over to you. It'd be interesting to see, is that a similar picture that you are seeing in Sweden? I know you wanted to talk a bit about NATO. What's the approach of the Swedish government? Over to you.
Thank you, Susan and Aisha, for putting this together. And I want to start by saying how proud we are to stand shoulder to shoulder with you and all of our colleagues throughout the ACE network in supporting Andy and his team and speaking the truth about Ukraine. And Andy, I just want to echo, because it bears repeating, you are in our thoughts and prayers every day. And I think, the people of Ukraine are an inspiration to the world. So with that, I'll give a little bit of an overview of, I think, from a business perspective, what's happening here. I mean, our members are first and foremost, they're worried about protecting their people. And they're also standing in solidarity with the people of Ukraine. And even the broader Swedish business community, I think, are doing the same. It's quite apparent. I mean, the support for Ukraine, I mean, many parts of the city, like some of the sort of central iconic pieces of Stockholm are blue and yellow, and and the business community and the community as a whole has really been supportive of Ukraine. Some of the bigger Swedish businesses have pulled out of Russia or announced plans to pull out of Russia. And obviously some businesses are more impacted than others, so it's a more complicated process. But overall, the Swedish business community has been, I think, responsive to the call to leave Russia. The other thing, is the business continuity and securing supply chains. Those are the other priorities we hear about. Obviously, again, some businesses face greater risks, but what we are seeing, and I'm sure all of you are seeing, is that the pandemic has really prepared businesses, business leaders to urgently work to protect staff wherever they are in the world and secure supply chains and reconfigure business operations, or in this case, shut them down. Overall, the feeling in Sweden, I think, is that the war has unified Europe and the West and reanimated NATO in a way that it hasn't been since its founding in 1949. But yeah, that said, Sweden is like in kind of the worst position, being that it's perceived as being part of the Allied opposition to the war, which it is, and a close partner with NATO. But yeah, like Finland, not in NATO. So we don't have the Article 5 guarantee, and there is some concern about that. The Swedish government has taken sort of a three-prong approach to addressing the situation in Ukraine. First and foremost, supporting Ukraine and Ukrainian citizens with various financial and humanitarian aid packages, as well as aid to support Ukraine's resistance. In fact, Sweden has sent weapons to Ukraine, I think 5,000 or so anti-tank missiles, which is the first time Sweden has sent weapons to a war zone since 1939. And of course, they're joining with other countries to apply sanctions on the Russian regime, and then taking measures to strengthen Sweden. So just even before the war, Sweden had taken steps to increase its defense budget, and now it's moving to increase it further still up to 2% of GDP by 2033.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks a lot. Thanks. That's some insightful remarks there as well, particularly on this, both you being as well being a close partner to NATO. Interesting to hear that from both you and Finland. We've got some time remaining for questions, so I'm pleased about that because there are many coming to the chat. In fact, the first one I'm going to go to is the last one there, which I mentioned to you, Andy, at the beginning. Andy, if you want to just, alluded to the fact that the 3 prime ministers had been over recently. I think it was last week, beginning of last week, and there is a question in the chat about that also. How was that? Was that helpful? Was there any outcome? Do you see that type of visit as being helpful? Should any others go over? Actually, we have President Biden coming to Brussels this week. I read the paper today. He is not planning on going to Ukraine. But just in general terms, how helpful is this?
Yeah, thank you, Susan. I think any visit is extremely helpful. I think it brings to the agenda the reality of what's going on. It's being able to tell the truth about this brutal war that Russia has illegally started against Ukraine. The three, it was the Czech, the Polish, and the Slovenian prime ministers. I hear today that Boris Johnson is considering a visit maybe to Kiev. I think there are just so many people. I saw that former Prime Minister David Cameron was driving a lorry yesterday to Poland delivering goods. So I think it is important. I think it's the solidarity of all free nations coming together, standing up for the truth, because I think this is the future of Europe. Because if in 21st century Europe we see an invasion of an independent sovereign state, then the question is, where does it stop from here? So, I mean, the answer is yes. We're extremely grateful to all the support of the governments, and it's this European family all coming together.
Thanks, Andy. I'm going to throw out another question there. You can probably, those of you can see it in the chat. I don't know if anyone who would like to respond to that. It's the one that actually comes up quite a lot at the moment. None of you have actually raised it, but it's a concern of companies. The person on the line has said the Russian government has flagged the possibility of counteractions against Western companies closing down. We're hearing quite a lot about that, about criminal sanctions and repercussions. And therefore, companies are extremely concerned. What they're concerned is how do they look after employees? Does anyone like to comment on that? You hearing that as well? Concerns from your companies? And do we know? Have we got any news? Here the question is: do we know at this stage if local Russian employees have faced difficulties with the government? Would anyone like to cover that question? Anyone hearing anything?
We haven't had that in Lithuania. I haven't heard anything similar to any backlash.
You haven't heard?
No.
Anyone else? Maybe from the business people on the line. Tomi, I don't know. We're hearing from some US companies that they are concerned about this happening. Any views?
Yeah, there has been news about Russians threatening to just take over the operations of those Finnish companies who are pulling out from Russia, so that they will just take over the business and just stealing it. So I haven't discussed personally with those companies. I know some of those clients, but I haven't had a chance to discuss yet what are then the considerations regarding the employees and all of that. But yeah, there are definitely threats like that in the air.
Anyone else want to comment at all? No, in that case, there's maybe on a different tack. Supply chains came up a lot with, I think, all of you actually, about resilience of supply chains. And again, we're certainly also hearing about this is going to impact many businesses down the line and the economy. A question here about maybe Andy, for there are many legitimate businesses producing semiconductors, steel, medicine, disruption. what is the impact on the global value chains in the many industries about, you mentioned agriculture, Andy, but we know there are a lot of other raw materials and parts coming out of Ukraine. We're already hearing about the impact. I don't know, either you, Andy, or somebody else would like to comment on this.
Yeah, I'll take a stab. I think that the most imminent disruption that we have seen is in the automobile industry. Why? Because there are many plants in sort of across Ukraine that do manufacture parts for automobiles. And literally just a few weeks before the start of the war, we visited some of these plants, and they have a just-in-time delivery. So all the parts from all different parts of the world, they all come together, and they usually have 10 days to manufacture. So these are like the wiring. So we have seen some of the groups like the Volkswagen Group, especially I think the Audi Q8, where all the wiring was coming from Ukraine. I think that has actually taken a hit, and I think they stopped production until that they find new alternatives, or if they find alternatives to the supply chain. So I think that was probably the most immediate. We are seeing again in the longer term, I think steel. We saw one of the big steel mills being bombed in Mariupol yesterday. And I think in the longer term, it's really going to be about the food supplies regarding, especially some countries in Northern Africa, Southeast Asia, predominantly, and parts of the EU that have been pretty heavily reliant on grain imports from Ukraine.
Yeah, indeed. I think, Andy, to your last point, I mean, we obviously for this call, we're very much focused on Europe, and a lot of the press is focused on Europe and how, I think someone already mentioned the some shops now, goods are going off the shelves, there's panic buying again, goes back to your comment, Tadas, about panic is not really helpful anywhere. But in fact, it is Africa. I think we need to think about the rest of the world as well. There's going to be a massive impact on the rest of the world, and that will eventually impact Europe again if there's a food crisis in Africa. So that will impact us too. Indeed. I don't know if anyone else wanted to comment, if anyone else has got any examples of this supply chain impact. It's obviously going to affect many of our member companies along the line. Switching gear, Daria, because I said I'd come back to you on cybersecurity. Maybe you can talk to us a little bit more about that and the war. There's the security aspect, the more physical one that many of your countries we're all rightly concerned about, but cybersecurity has the potential for massive impact. Can you enlighten us a little bit?
Oh, thank you, Susan. Actually, this is one of the direct concerns that we've heard from our members, and these are the topics they would like to ask for us to lead discussions about, because, as you know, Estonia has gone through a massive cyber attack in 2007. And which froze our country for a few days, but then that's what made us to be the expert in cybersecurity space. So in that sense, I think that was a good lesson to always be prepared for any kind of threat in the cyberspace. And I think this is definitely back on the table as a tool. And this is why it's so important for right now businesses and our members to understand how to protect their business operations, how to make sure that there's business continuity should there be a cyber attack. So we are actually planning here in AmCham Estonia quite a few events on this topic, just to educate from small to big businesses what they can do specifically right now to protect themselves.
Yeah, thanks. I don't know, feel free to jump in if anybody else wants to come in on any of these questions, please do. I mean, we've only got a few more minutes. Otherwise, what about the word propaganda came up? I think that was also from Estonia at the beginning. But I think a lot of the listeners would also be interested in the propaganda war that's going on here, and the closure, as several of you mentioned, of shutting down the Russian TV stations in certainly the Baltic countries. Has there been any pushback from people there? Is there any sort of freedom of information? I mean, just to play devil's advocate here, is there any resistance to this, or has it been actually accepted and received? Tadas?
Well, so far there hasn't been any pushback, but one thing that's very worrisome is Russia getting some sort of pretext to start threatening even. And I've heard about the Russian embassy in Finland sending messages to the Russian-speaking Finnish population. I heard about the same down all the way down to Moldova, that the Russian embassy is gathering information, waiting for somebody to say something that is exactly what they want to hear in order to use that as some sort of pretext. So, that's probably a more worrisome thing. As far as the misinformation goes, those channels, you still have a lot of irresponsible journalism in Lithuania, as I view it, where they're more concerned about click rates instead of actually, but what has been confirmed as real news. So that's obviously very disturbing. But I have to admit, pre-war, during the war, and even post-war, that's going to be the same thing. That's very difficult to change. But I think as far as AmCham Lithuania goes, it's something that we're going to put a larger effort into trying to change. Not to abolish, but to change, because we'll never abolish it. So that's, I think, going to be on our agenda over the coming 6 months.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. It'd be interesting to hear anyone else's views on how, and Andy as well, on how AmChams can help ultimately. I mean, to your point, Tadas, I heard over the weekend how the Russians are taking news stories from the West, or wherever they may come from, not necessarily the West, and just slapping fake news on them and issuing them, so that anything, how do we, this communications war is almost, is a massive one. So anything that a journalist produces gets fake news slapped on it, and out it goes. Interesting comment from you, Peter, in the chat there, I see as well. Thanks for that on the cyber attacks. And indeed, very much hearing that Ukraine, and good for Ukraine, this resilience of doing it, let's not forget they're out there cyber attacking back too. Does anyone want to comment on any of that, on the propaganda piece, the communications piece? I don't know, Liga.
I can just relate to what Tadas said. I think it is a very, very important topic. And here in Latvia, I didn't mention that, but my country did the same thing that Estonia and Lithuania did. We also banned all the propaganda channels, and I haven't seen much pushback from Russian-speaking population, although it is quite huge in Latvia. It's around 37% of Russian speakers with their native language being Russian at home. We are seeing some of these miscommunications coming from Russian speakers in the media, in the social media mostly. But I think largely, like people, just generally, population here, be it Russian speakers or Latvian speakers or others, they are getting more and more informed, which is very important. Even if and when they are speaking to their sort of relatives and colleagues and friends back in Russia or Belarus. And they are sharing their stories, because this is quite actually shocking in some ways that, for example, sister in Latvia speaks to her sister in Russia, and they're just not believing what their sister in Latvia tells them, because they are simply sort of with closed eyes, and they just refuse to believe that. But I think this is up to one point when it will break down, and I very, very much hope that it is sooner than later.
Yeah, no, thanks. That, yeah, indeed, we're hearing more and more of those stories. We're coming just to the top of the hour. We never have enough time. I just want to point out a couple of things. One, there is, and maybe Andy, you can help with this. I want to point out for anyone on the line, majority of the AmChams here probably have landing pages, Stand With Ukraine sites. I'm sure there's something on the AmCham Ukraine site. There's somebody here, Andy, asking for a list of credible and effective lists of charity organizations to help Ukrainians. So Andy, if you can I suggest that person looks at the AmCham Ukraine site. I know, Andy, you sent something around to the AmChams Europe network this week, or it's going out, an organization asking companies for food. The whole list of all the food types that are being requested by the Ukrainian government, please do send that around. And I see the last, from Olga, Stand With Ukraine page, daily updates on how you can help Ukraine. Oh, that is from AmCham Ukraine. So with that, Andy, would you like to have the last word? Anything else that you can do to help?
In 21st century Europe, Russians are slaughtering, innocent women and children. And I think, what we ask is, just to speak the truth, in this murder that is going on today, in this illegal invasion, this war. I think, from our side, we are pushing with the US Chamber for members really to ask, why are they continuing to profiteer doing business in Russia? We support the hundreds of US companies and international companies that have shut down, that have stopped. I think it is an extremely important message to deliver. And I think it is focusing on the ethics of doing business during genocide, during war crimes, and collaborating with a pariah government in Russia. I think this we have to stand for the truth, because I think that's the number one thing we have to do today. So I'm very grateful for everyone who does speak the truth. I think I'm grateful for all your support, and we need to stop this killing as soon as possible.
Thank you, Andy. I'm sure that everybody who's certainly on the panel and who's tuned in today, I'm sure wholeheartedly agrees with you there. We certainly stand behind you on that, Andy. And with that, I'm afraid we have come to the top of the hour. If I say to anyone on the line, if you want to make contact with any of my colleagues here, I'm sure they would be absolutely pleased to inform you more. Do take a look at all the different AmCham sites and contact them that way. I would like to thank you all, Andy, Taras, Daria, Tomi, Peter, and Liga. Thanks for your time. Thanks for everything that you're doing. And thanks to everybody for joining. With that, I'm sure we'll be back. And let's hope next time it's in a moment of peace, but we can still wish and pray for peace. Thank you very much, everybody. Bye for now.
Thank you. God bless.
Bye.
Thank you.